Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I have got another layout for the Pink Paislee design team, and I'm going to use some mixed media on this layout. So I'm starting with a little bit of gesso, and when I say a little bit of gesso, what I mean is way too much gesso. You'll see in a minute. I end up having to scrape quite a lot of this off. But I've run out of clear gesso, so I had to use white, and because you can quite clearly see even here, the white gesso is a totally different color to my cardstock background, so I need to cover the entire 12 by 12 sheet just to make sure I've got a solid white base. Now I let that dry, and then I'm going to use some modeling paste and this stencil. I created this stencil myself using a design of mine that was a freebie for my patrons, and I just cut that on my silhouette with some stencil material, and as you can tell, rainbows. I totally love it, so I had to use it today. Rainbows definitely are my favorite color, and that's what this layout is all going to be about. The stencil is a little bit delicate, so I'm being really careful and taking my time, but I am going to spread the modeling paste all over this sort of 2/3 of the left side of the page. I am going to fill in that little gap down the bottom there as well. Now once that modeling paste was all dry, I could move on to the next part of my layout, which is to use the rainbow cut file from Paige Evans, and I'm going to back that with some papers from Bloom Street. Now the actual rainbow cut file is a full rainbow with clouds on both sides, and what I've done is used sort of 1/2 of that rainbow, and I've just resized it in the Silhouette software so that I can get a sort of large piece of the rainbow on the right hand side of my page and then a slightly smaller version up the top. Now I went ahead through the Bloom Street 12 by 12 pad and just picked out some papers that are going to be in rainbow order, of course, and I'm going to go ahead and start backing my cut file. So I am using the leftover pieces on my cutting mat to use as a template. So I just flip the paper upside down, I flip the piece upside down, then I trace around it with a pencil, and that way I don't have to be any sort of particular carefulness with it. And then I can just go ahead and trim that out with my scissors. I'm leaving a little bit, maybe 1/16 of an inch maybe along the outside of the pencil line, so that I've got somewhere to actually adhere that piece to. And then I can go ahead and just add a tiny little bead of adhesive. Now I'm just using a sort of PVA glue in a fine line bottle. I just add that to the pieces of my cut file, and then I can add in the backing piece. I'm just starting at the bottom here. This one was a little tricky to do because it doesn't have anything joining those pieces at the end. So it does take a little while for me to line up all of those pieces. And then that's the first part of my rainbow done, and I can move on to the next color. I didn't end up picking out enough papers. I thought I had counted properly, but I hadn't. And so I do have to add one in at the end. But basically the process is exactly the same for each piece. I'm just gonna flip over the cut file piece, flip over my paper. That way everything is around the right way. Trace it out, cut it out, and glue it onto the cut file. This is a pretty tedious process, and I am definitely not one of those people who finds backing cut files in any way therapeutic, and so I'm not going to make you watch all of this because snore. So eventually I get that first side, the first big rainbow all backed. I'm just using my scissors, totally cheating, and trimming off any little pieces that came off the edge. And then I can go ahead and repeat the process with the smaller rainbow. What I'm going to do this time though is reverse the order of the colors. So I started with pink and made my way through to purple with the bigger one. This time I'm going to start with the purple and make my way through to pink with the smaller rainbow, just to kind of balance out those colors a little bit. But apart from that, I'm using the exact same process, so you definitely don't need to see all of that again. This rainbow is slightly different because I did I did trim it in the Silhouette Studio software so that it would have the top corner of my layout on there, and so that's why I've got these sharp edges that you could see. I think if I did it again, I would probably maybe create the entire rainbow and then trim it down afterwards, because it was a little bit harder having these sharp edges with no edge to the actual cut file piece. But I get there in the end, and now all I've got left on these cut files is the clouds to do. And instead of using Bloom Street, I'm just going to add a little piece of vellum to those. It kind of is going to be able to sort of show my mixed media in behind that cut file sort of cloud piece. So I'm going back to my background now, and I've just spritzed the whole piece with water, and I'm going to just add a few little drops of liquid watercolors. I'm not going to do too much in the way of kind of messing about with those. I'm just adding a lot of water to them and letting them kind of meld and blend together to create a whole different bunch of colors. But because I've got cut file pieces on both the right and left side of the layout, I'm going to keep this sort of colorful mixed media more towards the middle of my modeling paste piece. So you can see me, I'm just testing it out as I go as to where the colors need to go, but I'm going to create this strip of rainbow down the middle, just letting everything kind of blend together. I'm definitely no expert when it comes to mixed media, but I loved the way that these watercolors all blended together. I'm really only using a few colors. I've got pink, a yellow, a blue, and a purple, and they all kind of mix and meld together to create all those sort of secondary colors. And if you can be patient and let those sort of work together themselves and dry together, it just comes up with some really beautiful blends. I, however, have very little patience for letting things dry like that, so I do end up using a heat gun just to quickly dry some of the watercolor. You can see here I've dried it all off, and then I'm adding a few splatters of those same colors. If you add splatters while the whole thing's wet, they just kind of blend in together as well. So I waited until everything was dry and then added a few more splatters, and then I can go ahead and let everything dry off completely. At this point, I'm going to add my cut file on to my background, and I want to add a little bit of dimension, so I'm going to use some craft foam to do that. The piece of the cut file that I've backed with the pattern papers is super easy. I'm just going to add some strips of craft foam and then add some adhesive and stick that down. But the part of the cut file that I have stuck down with a vellum, obviously I can't put craft foam behind the vellum, you'll be able to see it. So I had to cut some very thin strips of craft foam and kind of bend them around where the actual cut file is. And it worked not too badly, to be fair. I probably would have been in real trouble if those lines were any smaller on the cut file, but they are quite thick, so I did manage to get everything stuck down nicely with that craft foam. It just gives it that little bit of dimension. And now I can add my photo, and the rest of the layout is going to come together really quickly. My photo here, you can see me looking at a gorgeous little yarn rainbow that my beautiful friend Lisa sent me. It arrived right in the middle of lockdown, and it was just the most perfect, happy, lovely gift. I definitely had to document that on a layout. So I took the selfie, and you can see I've backed that with some craft foam as well, just so that it can sit up from the cut file. And really all I'm going to do is just really simply embellish this page with some of the floral die cuts from Bloom Street. They're very pretty. I've used a lot of them. There are a lot in this pack, which means you can really easily make tons of layouts, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm not fussing around too much with these die cuts. I'm gonna just start sticking stuff down as I go and cross my fingers that it all works. I'm not doing anything sort of like tone on tone or anything like that. I am just making clusters of color to go around my photo just to give it a little bit more of a focal point. This is a really busy layout for me, mixed media and rainbow and colors and cut files, and so I do want my photo to stand out from there, but I don't want to go overboard with the embellishment. So I'm just adding a few of these larger sort of floral clusters. I like them. I usually don't love them because they've got that sort of white outline around them, but in this particular instance they work really well because they kind of highlight those flowers, and they stand out a little bit against this busy background. One thing I hadn't really taken into consideration for the layout was the fact that I don't really have anywhere to add a title on here. So I was a tiny bit concerned about where I was going to do that. And so as I'm sticking these flowers down, I am trying not to add too much towards the bottom, because at this point I'm thinking that I might add my title along the bottom of the cloud. It's not going to fit onto the actual layout itself. It's going to have to sit on top of the cut file. So I just left it as is. I'm going to add a few little sparkles. Have to add a few little sparkles with some of the sequins from the Bloom Street sequin mix here. I love these silver ones. They are very, very shiny and pretty. So I added a few of those in just around among the flowers and the clouds, just to add a little sparkly shine. Now I did want to add this title on here. It's one of my favorite hashtags on Instagram. Hashtag rainbow is my favorite color, which means it's an exceptionally long title, which makes it a little bit harder to fit on here as well. I also didn't want it to take away too much attention from the actual rainbowness of the page. So I used these white foam alphas. They're super old. They're from the Pick Me Up collection. They're my favorite. So I've got a few sets of those, which means I still have some to use, but I love the tiny little size. They're perfect for doing a longer title like this. You can see I ended up having to split my title into 2 lines. It definitely was not going to fit on that cloud in a single line, so technically not a hashtag, but still fit in that gap really nicely. And that's my layout all done. It's bold, it's bright, it's full of rainbows, and I just love it. Rainbow really is my favorite color. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you want to keep watching, there are a couple more videos on screen. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Bye guys.